My name is Nancy Silverman Limprecht. I was born in Council Bluffs, Iowa, December 10th, 1947, to Lorraine Meyerson and Robert Silverman. And shortly thereafter, we moved to Omaha. And my earliest memories are of Omaha, not Council Bluffs. Council Bluffs, I think we lived in the Jarouk Court, which my brother has memories of, but I don't. My first recollection is living on 5431 Seward Street in Omaha. And we were pretty close with our neighbors. My best friend, Susan Gerber, lived across the street, as did another good friend of mine, Susan Garber. Then we had, next door to us was a very nice, and they were Jewish, both of those groups. Next door to us was a non-Jewish family, and he worked for the Union Pacific Railroad, and his name was R.R. Lines, and we always thought that was clever. Anyway, so I lived in that house and went to Harrison Elementary School for kindergarten through 6th grade. And I never thought of there being a lot of Jews at Harrison, but actually there were, because in my class I can remember lots of Jewish classmates. We had Benji Shafton, who I think he shared a birthday with me, or it was like one day before or something like that. And Susan Gerber and Susan Garber and Phyllis Lulchuk and Mallory Goldware, they were all classmates of mine, and I'm sure there are about maybe three others that were Jewish in a class of, 35 or something, so that was actually a pretty high percentage. When I was in grade school, I think my favorite activity was Campfire Girls. We were part of Campfire Girls. I also attended Temple Israel, but they were in the new building, so I don't recall any old building. I mean, the new building prior to the one that they're in now. Rabbi Brooks was our rabbi. So I went to religious school. I had one teacher who I remember from religious school because I named my daughter after her. I think her name was Eleanor Whitman. And I just thought she was wonderful. Anyhow, what do I recall about my childhood? In Campfire Girls, I think my mother took a turn being troop leader, and so did Mrs. Garber across the street. And I used to go to Camp Harriet Harding in Louisville, Nebraska every summer, and that was what I truly loved. I didn't go to any of the Jewish camps. And at Camp Harriet Harding, there were very few Jewish kids. I may have been the only one who went there. But I truly loved that and all of the campfire experience. Let's see. Growing up, my grandparents on my father's side were Ann and Harry Silverman. And although they used to live, they had a house in Country Club. The only house that I can remember was an apartment they had at the Buckingham Manor near, I guess, Underwood, around, I think, 38th in Underwood. But I remember going, I loved to spend the night in that apartment. Early on, Grandma Ann had a Steinway grand piano in her living room because she was a quite good pianist. And Grandpa Harry, I'm not sure whether this was how they met or anything like that, but Grandpa Harry used to play the violin and played it, I think, for one of the theaters before they had talkie films. So he played in the orchestra for the theater, and I think Grandma Ann did a little of that too. They were both born in Des Moines, Iowa, which was kind of surprising to me because it seemed like all of my friends had grandparents who were born in the old country, and I actually had grandparents who were born in the United States. Grandpa was a attorney, and my father was an attorney also, and they shared a practice at the Brandeis Theater building. And I used to love to go to visit their office because it was next to the Brandeis store and in the same place where the Brandeis Theater was, and it had this elevator cage that scared me tremendously to go up to his office. My father had he had a secretary, and I was trying to remember her name. I think it was Roberta, but it was and I remember her answering the phone, Jackson 2526. She was noteworthy because she was Negro, and there was no one then who had a black secretary, but she was a black legal secretary. And I do believe that my parents were members of the NAACP because they were both strong advocates of civil rights. Anyhow, my other parents, Sam and May Meyerson, when I was a little girl, they lived in Council Bluffs. My grandfather had come to the United States in 1905, and you can read all about it because he wrote he dictated his autobiography to Mother on his 70th birthday, and that's already in the property of all of his descendants, so we all have that. But he came from Latvia in 1905 to join his older brother, who was already here, and to join other members of the family who had cousins and so forth who had preceded him. And he was first a peddler in Omaha and then had a grocery store in Council Bluffs, and there are lots of pictures of him and my grandmother advertising the grocery store. When I was a kid, he no longer had the grocery store. He was, he was retired. I think he was involved with my Uncle Leo Meyerson in establishing World Radio early on, which was a very, very big concern. Originally, Uncle Leo, who of course wrote his own autobiography, and that's another book which everyone probably has access to tell all of that, but he was originally doing radio parts for the military. I think that was his big break, and after that he got into CB radios. And then I think about the time not CB, but shortwave, then CB, and then about the time that Larry, his son, took over from him, it was more stereo. Okay, so when I was a kid, the first play I remember that my grandmother and grandfather lived was on Roosevelt Avenue in Council Bluffs, and that was the same house that my mother grew up in, so it was kind of neat that they lived in that same house. And I have very vague memories of it. I remember the front bedroom that had twin beds that my mother and her sister June lived in. I used to spend the night there, and you could hear the train going by, and I loved the sound of the train. But later on, my Grandpa Sam and Grandma May moved to Kenwood Avenue in Council Bluffs, which was a more modern brick house, and I continued to spend the nights frequently over there. I also occasionally spent the nights at my Uncle Leo and Aunt Helen's house, and that was exciting. They also lived in Council Bluffs. What I remember about my Grandpa Sam was that he had only had a formal, I guess, up to through third grade education, but he was really good with numbers and could calculate in his head better than anybody else. He was, his ideas, I don't think, were terribly progressive, but there were two very good memories that I have of him, and one is that he taught me to play gin, and we used to play gin together all the time. And he also taught me exercises, and we would get on the floor and do bicycle, stick our rumps in the air and do the bicycle thing. And this was when I was maybe 7 or 8. His Grandma May, I have practically no memories of her. I mean, she died in 1957, so I was like 9 years old when she died, but I can't remember anything particular that she said to me at any time, or anything that she said to anybody that stayed in my mind. I do recall her collection of little glass animals that was on her dressing table. I think she died of liver cancer in 57, and I remember spending time in her hospital room. And my Grandpa Sam soon remarried Shirley Woolner, and so I remember Grandpa and Shirley for most of the rest of my childhood, because they were the couple, and Grandpa lived to a ripe age. I think he died at the age of 93 or 94. My other grandparents, I recall a lot more. Of course, I recall my Grandma Ann as being absolutely gorgeous, even into her 50s. I remember when we'd ride in a convertible, she was getting wolf whistles, and she was my grandmother, which I thought was a little bit strange, but she was talented drawing. She used to work as a volunteer for the Veterans Hospital, and she used to do portraits of the veterans, and she'd play the piano. And I never saw the drawings that she did, but I also like to draw portraits, and so maybe I got some of the artistic tendency from her. My grandfather was my Grandpa Harry. The major things I remember about him was just that he was extremely he was just the pillar of the community. Absolutely straight, maybe sort of humorless. I don't recall him as having a wonderful sense of humor, although my father did, so he had to get it from somewhere. But I always thought that my my grandpa Harry, despite that I think he laid the cornerstone of the original Jewish Community Center downtown. I considered him the epitome of the Protestant ethic, in terms of working hard and all of that, and being serious. Speaking of the Jewish Community Center, I do recall it it was an old building, I think across from Central High, that was downtown, and they had an indoor swimming pool that was quite warm, and I recall swimming, going there for maybe swimming lessons and going swimming, but I think there was a track, either around the gym or around the swimming pool, but it was a sloped track on the second floor, and this is appeared in my nightmares for many years, because I always had this feeling that if I got on the track and I stopped, I would slide and fall down into the area inside. I don't know if they still make those slanted, that kind of track that are sort of slanted, so you're banking as you're going around, but that was the indoor track there. Other than that, I don't remember a lot about the Jewish Community Center. Let's see. Okay, when I was a little kid, as I said, my father was an attorney, and he used to, I believe, take the bus to work. We only had one car, and my mother didn't work except she did a lot of volunteer work, and she would work as a census taker every 4 years. She also was very big into theatricals, and so she did, there were, like Hadassah had